Self-awareness does not fail in the company of other people. It depends who the company is. If you're hanging out with Snoop Dogg, it'll fail. If you hang out with Angela Davis, it won't fail. I don't live very far from Angela Davis. She lives maybe 5 or 6 houses away from us. And she usually comes out around 7, 8 at night, walks her dog. What's his name, the dog's name? I don't know, some stoic name, Aurelius, Marcus Aurelius or something. And because I know her history a little bit, the moment I just see her, all these thoughts and all these emotions come upon me. She doesn't need to say much. Then I have a neighbor. I just don't like him. If there was a way I could get rid of him, I would have. But I can't. And it's interesting because you have 2 different human beings creating 2 different sets of emotions and thought process. And one of the reasons why I say you guys should never take any of the things we talk about home is because you don't really have much of a support system. These ideas, it is true that they get you depressed. It is true that they make you profoundly lonely. But if you have friends who can kind of be supportive to those sets of ideas and emotions, then you'll be fine being alone with other people who also feel alone. So you can break bread in that particular fashion. The other part of your question has to do with the following. You know how sometimes you look yourself in the mirror and you're disgusted by the way you look? You cut your hair, you've gone blonde. God, nature, biology just did not give you good looks. You look like a truck. And every time you look yourself in the mirror, you're disgusted. Sometimes other people allow you to see your own self. Maybe you have nothing in common with them. Maybe you have too much emotions and feelings, but they're not a good vehicle to carry them, to listen to them. And so they make you feel even more isolated, even more alone. It's good to choose people who have the right kind of loneliness and the right kind of depression. Otherwise, you'll find yourself in a bit of a mess. Anyone else? Before we... Andrew?
That's 2 questions. It seems that there's a correlation between increase in mental illness, divorce, suicide, and a decrease in religious affiliation. Do you think there's a cause there? And do you think that there could be some critical mass of confusion and suffering that could people back?
Muhammad Ali and George Foreman had a fight in Zaire. I think it was 1978. The prediction was that Muhammad Ali is going to get his behind whooped. George Foreman was a beast. Muhammad Ali was near the end of his career almost. 8 rounds. George Foreman just had no fuel left. And with a couple of punches, Ali just knocked him to the floor. Later on, as the young kids in Zaire began to celebrate and chant his name, Muhammad Ali was struck with something very uncommon. He looked at these people, these kids, and some adults, and he realized that they have nothing. They have no running water. They live in these huts. They have nothing. They suffer from so much poverty. And he says to himself, whispers at first, that we have poverty in America, but the poverty in America leads to violence, leads to despair, leads to loneliness. But the poverty in Zaire, you guys have nothing, and yet there is so much restraint, so much self-respect, so much compassion, love, generosity. How is that? So there is something about the fabric of America that doesn't allow poverty to generate things that are positive for people. The other aspect is capitalism itself. Capitalism is a system, and it's a system that's always existed. You can't function without capital. And you have to kind of look at capital in a variety of different ways. You can have spiritual capital, you can have emotional capital, you can have physical capital. And one of the things about capital is it's about power, okay? Now, this particular system of capitalism, which is relatively new, America got into power around, let's just say, the 1950s. World War II ends, America becomes a superpower now. Now, one of the ways that capitalism can sustain itself, can prosper, is by making sure that if, for example, you go to the store and you buy this phone, there has to be something about the company, about the system, about your relationship to this phone that can be controlled by the system itself. That you sign a contract for about 2 years, it's a good phone, it's the latest phone, but 6 months from now, all of a sudden, you turn on the TV to watch Succession, the movie, on TV, and all of a sudden there is this advertisement about AT&T having created a brand new phone. It dances for you, sings for you, lays at night next to you. It does all sorts of things. Now, usually your contract ends in about 2 years, and the phone will probably go on working for another 5 or 6 or 10 years. But what happens is the system manipulates your psyche. And we're the sort of animals that, it's a really strange thing to say, but we are after beauty. We are after perfection. We are after something that's new. Because when you're around something that's new, it's tantalizing. It brings you to life in some strange way. And what the system does, it somehow makes you feel as if the phone you have, which is only 6 months old, it's not sufficient. You used to take care of it, now you throw it around. And now you kind of look at your phone and you're disgusted. And even though you have another 1.5 years to your plan, even though the phone is good for another 10 years, you go back to the store. So the point is, you have this element of discontent. It doesn't matter what you have. It doesn't matter how long you have it for. Okay? In about a few weeks or few months, you will lose interest. Now, one of the side effects of this particular system that creates boredom so quickly is that all the things that used to give human life meaning, marriage, religion, relationships of any kind, having respect for yourself, for other people, everything becomes fluid. Heraclitus, the ancient Greek philosopher, used to say that you can't step in the same river twice because the water is alive, it's flowing. And that's what you have in the 21st century. Genders used to be relatively defined, but now no one knows. Almost everything under the sun is now under attack. It's not a bad thing. Revolution is never a bad thing. But when you get rid of the most basic things, then what happens is you begin to suffer a good amount of confusion. And human beings don't do well with confusion. We are not polygamous animals. We are monogamous. Monogamous in the sense that you need to have access to some basic realities of life. You need to know that on Monday through Thursday or Wednesday, you just come to class from 6 to 9. And what's going to happen for those of you who may come to enjoy this class is that you will get used to this class. You will become interested in the ideas, maybe even my voice, maybe even me, maybe even some of your classmates. And then once you become used to it, you begin to find a good amount of interest in it. The relationship grows. And then July 27th, the class ends. And then Monday comes, but there is no place to go. And you miss the ideas. You perhaps miss me. You perhaps miss your classmates. You perhaps miss this room, driving to Laney College. And then you'll feel somewhat lonely. But you're not going to do well with loneliness, so you have to find yourself some distraction. And so what you have in this particular system is that nothing works anymore. The chance of survival is maybe 5% for anything. But there is another, of course, aspect to this, which is it has taken the West about almost 700 years to get to this particular point. If, for example, Christianity has been around for about 2,000 years, it means that human beings have had 2,000 years of a relationship, relatively healthy relationship, with certain ideas in Christianity. That you just know you're a sinner. You were once an angel, you had wings, you were walking the Garden of Eden. Your ancestors, namely Adam and Eve, did A, B, C, D, they got expelled. Here you are. There is nothing about life that is worth enjoying. That is one of the main tenets of religion. Down here, it's your prison. Marriage is not meant to make you happy. Job is not meant to make you happy. You don't have sex for pleasure, maybe sometimes pleasure and boredom, but mostly for procreation. You don't have sex before marriage. Men and women keep their distance. Okay. You have a good amount of shame and guilt and fear inside you, and you need those components. They're important. You need to fear disappointing your father, your mother. You need to have this fear of disappointing your teachers because they'll give you an F. And then you need to have shame because when your mom asks, what was your grade in the religion class? And you say, Mom, I got an F, I'm sorry. You need to feel ashamed. They're good and healthy. Okay. Now, like any other relationship, imagine you and I are in a relationship. Okay. Now, you look behind you, there is Eric, who's a relatively handsome chap. And all of a sudden, he begins to occupy a certain space inside you. Now, whatever space he occupies inside you, it means it's my loss. I'm no longer in that particular space. 2 days later, it's Wiles. 2 days later, it's Joaquin. And before you know it, 90% of the space within you is occupied by other people. I only have 10%. Well, how long do you think our relationship is going to last? So when you look at the Western culture, you have the bubonic plague in the 13th century. Then you have people like Copernicus, you have people like Galileo, you have like people Martin Luther. Then you have the philosophers, Friedrich Nietzsche. Then you have Karl Marx, you have Sigmund Freud, you have the Industrial Revolution. Just too many things attacking the human psyche, their belief system, stability. And now you're in the 21st century, you have nothing left. This is not a culture that creates healthy human beings. So it's not just one single component that you can touch and say, that's the reason why people are a mess. There are lots of different components that have gone into play for many, many, many centuries to create a human being such as this. And they're very complicated. And so if you look at the human being as an engine, as a machine, modern people are very, very difficult to repair, nearly impossible. And I say this because when you go back to, say, the Gospel of Mark, when you go back to some of the ancient traditions, you realize that most people like Socrates, like Plato, like Jesus, like Muhammad, they had a cult, and they had a cult following. They wouldn't just talk about their teachings to anyone. You have a merchandise, it's called ideas. Some other person has like coffee. Okay, if someone is not interested in drinking coffee, well, it's a waste of your time to keep screaming and shouting, come to my store and buy coffee. They just don't like coffee. Maybe they're not ready for coffee. And one of the reasons, for example, and forgive me for taking the conversation in this particular path, you're no longer 20 or 30, you're almost 50. I know last night you said you're 44, I said 45. You said, no, I'm 44 now. I've increased you by 6 years. But the truth is, it's very difficult for you to just go out with someone and have casual conversation. You don't have that much time. You don't have that much energy. Perhaps you begin to think about your mortality a bit more seriously. And now what you are looking for is when you go out on a date, for example, you ask difficult questions. And then when you ask difficult questions, you realize people come out pretty hollow. They have nothing to offer you. You waste money, you waste energy, you waste conversation. In the end, you go home alone. I think whenever anyone finds themselves to be relatively mature, they have no choice but to ask difficult questions. And in an age such as this, where people are, for the most part, relatively superficial, you can go very far. There is also another aspect to this, which is women. Women, for the most part, do much better with ideas than men do. They just do. And I don't know if this is biological. I don't know if it's psychological. It's a mystery to me, too. But from my own experience in the past, say 30 years or so, and perhaps even going back to the car wash, which makes it about 45 years, women have the capacity to feel, and you need the feelings, you need the emotions. And you need to have those emotions for at least 15, 20 years. And then what happens is, and it's very difficult for men to have emotions, and they do, not that they don't, but there needs to come a point where, and one of the things about emotions is that they make you passive. And it's very difficult for men to become passive. And we'll talk about all of the stuff, once we kind of get rolling. Anyone else? Julian? Joaquin? Kendra? Kiara? Yeah.
Do you think poor is the mentality?
I'm sorry?
Do you think poor is the mentality?
Like, can someone be intellectually poor?
What I was saying, do you think poor is just the mindset?
No.
Do you think people choose to be poor because of the actions that they?
The word choice is it's difficult because the assumption is that you and I have a choice. I don't know if that's entirely true. I think for the most part, we are the product of our circumstances. Now, there are some geniuses around. I don't know how they're created. Let me give you an example. Malcolm X has a funny story. I mean, he's a funny character. Not funny because you can laugh at him because he's not a serious man. Funny because he's a creature that you have no choice but to look at in awe. You have a kid who's very, very young and sees with his own eyes his father getting lynched. That's a horror show. Then he sees his mother slowly going into the world of drugs and then basically disappearing from their life. Then they're divided into various foster care environments. He does what most people in poor circumstances do. You can't get a job. And I'm talking about a long time ago, still segregation. He ends up in prison. All of a sudden, there is this opening inside him. He becomes receptive to a certain message. And it's a strange thing. It's not like you and I don't receive messages from other people, like our parents, for example. Or you watch a great movie and you walk away from the movie and you say, yeah, I want to make some changes to my life. But those experiences for us, they just don't stick. I don't know why. But for Malcolm, they stuck. His life is completely transformed. It's profoundly magical, And then he becomes, to some extent, a slave to Elijah Muhammad. He becomes his mouthpiece. You have a guy who's got nothing, ends up in prison. He suffers from physical poverty, no money, no house, nothing. He suffers from emotional poverty, no mom, no dad, no siblings. He suffers from intellectual poverty. All I can do to survive in this culture is to rob people, steal, use profanities. I don't even like my skin color. I don't even like my hair color. And when he was in school, they used to call him the orange poodle, and he liked it. He liked it for one simple reason. You want other people to like you. to receive you. Even if they make fun of you, at least you belong to a group. It gives you meaning. And then he comes to understand a few things about himself, about Islam, about the human condition. And he looks at Elijah Muhammad and says, I'm not here for power. I don't care for power. I don't know what sort of a human being you need to be to walk away from all of that power. You have all these people under your belt. You can tell them to do whatever and they will. And he walks away completely from all of that. So when you talk about choice, when you talk about whether or not you and I have the ability to change, I think we have the capacity to be inspired. To change, you need to be in a relationship. It needs to be constant. It needs to be continuous. And like all relationships, you're going to encounter obstacles. You're going to encounter things you don't like. And yet you got to stick with it. It's like any art. You want to learn to play the piano? 10 years. Guitar? 10 years. Being a human being is no different. Especially the kind that Malcolm was. Yeah.
I think maybe we stopped caring about the power so much is because, like, every time, like, we have a leader, like a black leader, all they do is, like, kill them. Like, even my grandma, she lives in Oklahoma, and my uncle, he stayed in Tulsa, and I heard what they did to, like, Tulsa and all of that stuff. Like, just tearing down what they worked so hard for. And then every time we get a leader, somebody our color in power, then all they want to do is kill them or try to get them out of there. So it's just like, maybe that's why we stopped caring about leaders. We stopped caring about power because every time we get a leader or somebody good, like Martin Luther King, they assassinate him. So it's just like, what can you do?
I think whenever you're in the presence of someone who is much better than you, they make you feel bad about you. They don't have to say much. Imagine you go to a party and you're standing next to Beyonce. How many people do you think are going to come and say hello to you? How many people do you think are going to come to you and ask for your phone number? 0. Initially, it may be that Beyonce makes you feel good, but then you realize that nobody talks to you, nobody looks at you, nobody pays you attention. And then you hunger for that. And Socrates suffered the same fate. Muhammad did, the Buddha did, all of these people are. The point is, whenever you hang out with anyone who has a good amount of maturity, you have no choice but to feel bad about yourself. Incompetent, irrelevant, insignificant, cheap, hollow.
Is it right to feel that way?
To feel what way?
Inferior?
Yes.
It's right?
Yes.
Is it?
It's my soul sister. Hope you don't mind.
Hello? How are you? What's your name?
Diamond?
Diamond? Oh. Yes, please.
I'm trying to think like why I wanted to ask that question. Because there has been times when in past classes we've had discussions about topics that I don't know much about. And you feel like, how do they know that? And why don't I know that? What have they done that I haven't done? Do I need to do that? Is it going to help me in any way?
We'll talk about that tonight a little bit, I think. But if you feel bad about yourself in the right way, let's just say you took a class, sociology, and you raised your hand and you wrestled with the instructor. If it was cute, maybe physically, but mostly intellectually. And you came out a loser. You got kind of embarrassed in front of your classmates. He kind of made you feel a little stupid. Then what that does, if you're in the right place in life, if you're not overcome by anger, embarrassment, shame, feeling like you've been belittled, you'll walk your little behind to the library and you'll begin to check out some books. Maybe you'll drop out of school. You'll sit home and you'll just read and read and read and read. Then you take the same class with the same instructor. There is a scene in the movie Good Will Hunting. He's in a bar. There is this guy who's read some books, and this strange fellow is making fun of his friend, Ben Affleck. And so Matt Damon comes forward and says, what? You like to embarrass my friend in front of these people? Why do you do that? And he gives him some chapter from some book, and Matt Damon fights back with yet another chapter, another semester, another book that he has to read when he gets to the master's program. And the guy gets embarrassed. I think it's good to hang out with people that inspire you in the right way, and they have to take care of you. It's not enough for you to be inspired. Because what happens in inspiration is that there is this like juice that's flowing in your vein. You say, I'm going to go to the library, I'm going to read and read and read and read. But life is far too distracting. You're not going to be able to read as much as you think you might. And so what happens is you go home, you want to read, but you want to watch a movie. You have a physical body, it gets tired. You worked all day at Pete's. You hate people. You're mentally exhausted. You just want to sit back and do a mind-numbing thing for a few hours. And then a few hours turns into a few days, and then a few weeks. And then all of a sudden you catch yourself, you become mindful. And you say, man, I had promised myself 5 weeks ago to read. What the hell happened to me? When you lack the support system, this is what happens. You just forget.
So shouldn't you be able to find that support system within yourself?
No, you will never be able to. Look. Is it Larisha? Do you have children? Don't have children. You didn't hear that. When you're new to anything, whether it's the world of ideas or playing the piano, you're always going to be a newborn. There are passages in the Old Testament, there are passages in the Quran, I'm not quite sure about the New Testament, that we don't really need to read any books. We don't need to take any classes. If you have eyes that see and ears that hear, just look at your surrounding. And every person in this classroom will teach you a lesson. And the lesson is, for example, we spoke last night about not using your cell phone. Why is that guy using his cell phone? That's a great book to read. Then you begin to kind of examine the human psyche, human habits, laziness, lack of respect, shamelessness, culture. And then all of a sudden, if you thought him to be cute, now you're repulsed by him. Now, what was I going to say? Yes. So when you have a newborn, and you'll experience this when you have your own child, which is when they're born, they just lay. If they have an older sibling, what happens is they have this healthy jealousy and envy about them. My older sister is sitting up. I want to sit up. So they try many times until they're able to. Then either biologically or psychologically, they see that their sister is standing up, maybe sometimes even taking a few steps. Says, yeah, I want to stand up. And then they see their sister walking. I want to walk. Then they say they see their sister running. I want to run. And what you realize is that, like Joaquin's question about God within, if you want to make some changes, you have the resources. Just do it on your own. And the truth is, you are an infant. And what do infants do? Infants need help. Now, you need to understand that you and I live in a culture that encourages and promotes individuality. The word individual means whole, a single unit, that you're not a house divided unto itself, indivisible. You're not yet autonomous. It's Latin, being a law unto thyself. You still fumble. You stand, you fall. You run, you fall. And what happens every time you fall? You scream. Your knees get bloodied. Well, who needs to take care of you? Your parents, your grandparents, your sister, someone. Now you walk into the intellectual world. This is your first time being exposed to certain ideas. You are an infant. Which means for the next 6 weeks, all you do is you raise your hand and you ask questions. I will hold your hand so you don't fall. But you won't do that because that's not your culture. You won't do that because you're under the delusion that you can actually think. And I'm here to tell you, you can't. You may know how to think about going home, how to drive a car, how to buy this, how to buy that. But just because you know what your outfit is, how your day is going to be, it doesn't mean that you do well with abstract ideas. You need a different language. And even if you use the same words, you need different meanings. You don't have those just yet. And that means what? When you hold your father's hand when you want to walk, what does that say to you? Dependency, codependency, trust, faith, even love. But you won't do that. You've been hurt too much. You've been betrayed. So you take 1 step forward and 5 back. And so you never learn. That's how it is. And it's not about you, I'm just saying in general. Yeah.
Do you think that, like, certain people come in your life for a reason?
Say again?
Do you think that certain people come in your life for a reason in this season?
No. The truth is, it just doesn't matter. And I say that for the following reason. Look, in your short little life, you have had very many interesting experiences that have inspired you. Now, you may once in a while go home and say, that experience came to my life for a specific reason. That may be so. But that experience and that insight that you had from the experience eventually gets forgotten. It doesn't do much. It doesn't even create a dent. So what if you come to this class, for example, and this class and the ideas inspire you? What is that going to do? So you're going to go home, you're going to have some thoughts, some emotions, maybe you write poetry, maybe you'll go tomorrow and care for more your patients. But you need to survive. You need to kind of wrestle with people out there. What's going to happen? Eventually the inspiration will go away. Inspiration is not very difficult. You can be inspired by listening to Snoop Dogg, Miley Cyrus. You want to know what inspiration is? Go home, get a charcoal, put some lighter fluid on it, and light it up. What's going to happen? It's going to go in flames. How long is that going to last? 30 seconds? 10 seconds? And then what? If you want this fire to be a permanent fixture on the charcoal, put some fluid on it, let it sit. Put some more, let it sit. Put some more and put a match to it. Then stand next to it and fan it for the next half hour. Now you have fire from within. And then go back to it after 5 hours. All you have is ash. Anyone else before we... No one?
Did you talk about longevity?
In what?
Like you're talking a lot about how, like our interests and our inspirations are kind of short-lived, but like how do you connect that with like kind of you, like been teaching for a really long time now? Seems like.
No, it doesn't. Look, I'll tell you a story about longevity. It's negative, but it's about longevity, something that lives inside you and does not disappear. I had a student here at Laney about 20 years ago. When he was 3, his father forced him to have sex with a prostitute. And when he said no, his father slapped him and punched him. Eventually he did. And so because his father was an addict of sorts, he had no choice but to be forced in this sexual engagement on a weekly basis. When he came to my class, he was 18, and he was angry. He had not processed experience, and you can't process experience that are so intense. Because what happens is whenever you have a negative experience, you try to look away. You don't want to look at it. Because whenever you look at a negative experience, you have emotions. But you don't know what to do with the emotions. You want to explode, and you're tired of exploding. So in order not to explode, you cannot just become blind to certain events of your past. Okay? And then you keep going through life and you mess everything up. And then you say, I am just tired of living this way all the time. And by this time, you're like 90. So maybe I should get myself fixed. So you do therapy, maybe you read books, maybe you read the Bible, you go to church. And now you begin to look at the emotions. And they slowly just come to the surface. Now, this is your first time trying to be intimate with these emotions that you've tried to escape for most of your life. You have no power to control them. You know, we are creatures of power. We like power. Power allows you and I to know what we're going to with our day. How much money you can spend on this, how much money you can spend on that, how your Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday night going to be. To govern yourself in life, you need power. But when these emotions come up, you have zero power. They push you around. He was in my class for, I don't know, 5 years, and he disappeared. I ran into him accidentally in college in Berkeley. He was, I think, 40 by then. He was still angry. Now that is the longevity of certain events. You need to be broken, and you need to be broken in the right way so that that brokenness will never leave you. If I was to tell you another story, I had a cousin, he just loved his mom. He was crazy about his mom. And this is Iran, it's a Muslim environment. People, at least on the outside, are profoundly religious. He used to pray 5 times a day, and at the end of his prayer, he would add another prayer. I don't have the capacity to see my mom die. I need to die first, so I don't see her pass. And that's exactly what happened. So what you have is a man who's very frightened of losing his mom, to the point that every single day for about 18 years, and remember, Muslims pray 5 times a day. 5 times 365 times 18. And that's how you end your prayer. I want to die before my mom. And he did. Now, you can be broken in the right way, you can be broken in the wrong way. Whether negative or positive, being broken is a painful thing. Because we're not creatures who enjoy pain. We enjoy pleasure, but not pain. Even if you have a friend who cuts himself or herself, it's one pain overcoming another pain. You don't want to think about your father, so you cut. One pain, which is your skin bleeding and in pain, it's so intense that you just forget about your father. It's pain, but it gives you pleasure. your father isn't around anymore, mentally. So, if you're not broken in the right way, there is no longevity. And whatever longevity lives inside you is just poison. Yes, Joaquin?
So what's my train of thought?
It's okay. I'll come back. She okay?
She doesn't know where the restrooms are.
Well, go with her. By the way, before I forget, when you leave class, make sure you leave as a group. If you go to the BART station, make sure that someone is walking with you. Try, if you can, not to walk to wherever you want to go alone. So, and beginning next week, I'll just lock the door. And if anybody is late, you can just open the door for them. Sounds okay? Yeah, Jamal.
Barabbas or Jesus? Who would you choose?
Do you guys know who they are?
I know who Jesus is, not the first one. I don't.
Okay, so for those of you who may not know who JC is, I'm not sure if he actually existed, but if he did, I guess it doesn't really matter. Let's just say Jesus is a man of wisdom, and replace the name with simply wisdom. And wisdom is a difficult cross to carry. And if you want to know what wisdom is, for example, for those of you in this class who have read you know that book? You know which book I'm talking about?
Bible?
No. It's that book. Dustin Hoffman played the movie many, many years ago, Death of a Salesman. So in Death of a Salesman, what happens is, I can't believe you guys don't remember that book. So there is the father, and he has a son whose name is Chuck, and they have a great relationship. Chuck loves his father very much. He's old enough to go around with his father to various places because his father was a salesman. He used to sell knives or whatever. And so they're in a different city. Chuck is out having a good time with his friends. His father is in the hotel room, and Chuck doesn't knock, simply goes in, and he finds his father being with a woman who is not his mother. And from that point on, their relationship suffers. And of course, the father commits suicide so that the family can get their money. You have two things. You have Chuck the son seeing, witnessing what his father has done, and it's too much for him. And instead of sitting, talking, maybe understanding human nature a little bit, understanding men a little bit, understanding loneliness, understanding marriage, relationships, the easiest thing for him to do is just say, Dad, you're an awful human being. So that is wisdom. Whenever you have an experience or you see something and it weighs too much and you don't have the capacity to carry it, you look the other way. Barabbas, on the other hand, is, if you've seen the movie The Matrix, Morpheus offers Thomas Anderson, i.e. Neo, two pills. One is red, one is blue. And he says, you take the red pill, I'll show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. It's deep, it's dark, lots of pain. If you take the blue pill, you can wake up in your bed and think whatever. Okay? Now, Barabbas has a tendency of just telling people, you have every right to be angry, let's kill the Romans. It's an easy thing to do. Jesus, on the other hand, says, no, the Romans suffer from some faulty thinking. instead of killing them physically, why not have a conversation with them? Try to kill the way they think about life, about power, about Christianity, about Judaism. And once you're able to transform the way they think, you no longer have to fight them. Now, taking the path of wisdom or Jesus is very, very difficult. It's difficult for a variety of different reasons. If you look at, for example, someone like Jesus, how many disciples did he have? 12. Forget Judas, he killed himself. The other 11 disappeared. So not even Jesus was able to really completely transform his disciples. Okay. Look at Muhammad. His prophecy took place, 22 years? He fought almost 40 battles. Look at Moses. After having done all those things for his people, he looks at his brother Aaron and says, you know what? These people suck. I give them to you. I'm leaving. Look at Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher. He says, you know what? I don't want my people. I don't like my people. I don't even like the culture. In fact, I don't even like the country. I'm leaving. Look at Malcolm X. And what you have is wisdom always gets crucified. Barabbas offers us the easy path. And there's a reason as to why. Thinking is tough. Feeling is tough. Understanding is tough. Assuming is easy. Self-important, very easy. Arrogance, easy.